The Bengals make some post-deadline moves, and let's talk keys to beating Cleveland.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. Today we're going to get into the keys to beating the Cleveland Browns in perhaps the most meaningful battle for Ohio since the Cleveland Browns became an expansion team not too long ago after they moved to Baltimore and then reestablished a franchise in Cleveland. Like, when these teams have played, James, there's been one team in the cellar and one team, usually the Bengals or neither, trying to push for the playoffs. Recently, that has flipped a little bit. And this year, both teams in contention for a playoff spot going into week 9. Before we get to talking matchup, the Bengals made some moves today, James. Another first-round corner joins the roster. Hakeem Adeniji gets back to the 53. And unfortunately for Darius Hodge fans, Darius Hodge was waived. I think there's a good chance he makes it back to the practice squad. But Vernon Hargreaves is the name of the day.
Yeah, and I think I love this move. I really do. And it's not like it's a huge earth-shattering move, or I think he's going to be a Pro Bowler or live up to his first-round talent now suddenly with Lou Anarumo and company. But the fact that they added an affordable option at corner, because it's hard to find anything else at this stage anyway, but an affordable option at corner that has made 57 starts, right? And it's played in 65 games, has gotten a ton of experience, has made 5 starts this year. And I get it. It was for the Texans. It doesn't matter to me. Like, this team without Trey Waynes has a clear need or a potential need at corner. And so the fact that they've proactively went out and they got Trey Flowers and they claimed him, and now you claim a guy in Hargreaves, who I think is more capable and more likely of playing outside. And, you know, not that he's going to take Eli Apple's spot, but it gives you more depth. And all you had to do was cut a guy that, it wasn't playing much in Nick McLeod. So I think that this was a good move. When I saw he was released yesterday, I should have mentioned it on the show. Stupid, silly me. I didn't. But I was like, first-round corner. Well, they grabbed another first-round corner.
Between Eli Apple and now Vernon Hargreaves, however his name is pronounced, that's a couple more first-round corners to go with Trey Waynes, and it continues the tradition, James, of the Bengals loving first-round cornerbacks, whether it's the ones they draft like Jonathan Joseph, Leon Hall, Dre Kirkpatrick, Darqueze Dennard, William Jackson, or the ones they acquire via free agency or trade like Terrence Newman, Adam Jones, Kelly Jennings. Trey Waynes was acquired after he was drafted as well. And now they continue that tradition. 3 first-round corners on the team again. And to me, you love this move. To me, it's like, great. I have no problem with this move. It's a no-risk waiver claim. I'm more excited about Hargreaves than I was about Nick McLeod. He's a guy that came into the league as a consensus first-round talent. Nick Saban gave him an endorsement. I know he played for Florida, but Nick Saban praised Hargreaves coming out in 2016. He was knocked for his size. He was knocked by some for, some discipline issues, not off the field, but on the field in terms of trying to jump routes, trying to play too aggressive at times, trying to read quarterbacks and losing his guy at times. But elite movement skills, and was an 11th overall pick. And so sometimes you just take these bets. And like I said, Hargreaves is a lot more exciting than Nick McLeod. Even if he is your 4th, 5th corner, at least there's some potential there. There's some pedigree there, right? And he came into the league young. He's still young. And so some potential, maybe. I mean, doesn't necessarily play this year, maybe, right? But, there's some potential there at the very, very least.
Yeah, potential there. Let me ask you this. Who were you more excited about? Trey Flowers when they claimed him, or Vernon Hargreaves?
Hargreaves. Just, again, pedigree. I think he's actually even maybe been a better pro, although they're very similar in
Probably
terms of
close.
production and profile. Yeah, like neither guy stands out. They do very different things. Trey Flowers, bigger body
Mhm.
guy, doesn't move as well as Hargreaves, who's not as big, obviously. So very different archetypes of corner, but that athleticism tends to play. Usually you see freak athletes at corner figure it out. I'm not saying Hargraves well, but just in terms of the history of the position, the
Mhm.
really, really fast guys who can change direction really well usually work out at corner. And then it's just putting the mental part together. So we'll see if Lou Anarumo can pull a Mike Zimmer and do some cornerback rehabilitation with this defense in Cincinnati. And the other move to talk about, James, is the return of Hakeem Adeniji, who I think could very well be the first offensive lineman off the bench now at a number of positions if he's in game shape, if he's ready to go. And he could still be in relatively close to game shape. He came off that torn pec injury, and so he could have stayed. It's not like he was necessarily super limited in terms of cardiovascular exercise that he could have been doing.
Mhm.
So we'll see if he gets in there. It might still be Isaiah Prince in those heavy formations, but Hakeem Adeniji is a guy that's gotten work at guard, at tackle, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, I think, when he was first activated or designated for return. Jim Turner wanted to get him snaps at center back when Jim Turner was coaching the Bengals. So I don't know if that's happened. I doubt it, but it's nice to get some depth back on that interior or exterior offensive line where they have had some injuries.
Brian Callahan was asked about this on Thursday, and he said they're comfortable with him at tackle and guard. And I love this because if there is hope, and maybe I'm just in a good mood. Who knows, Jake? But if there's hope for bolstering the interior of this offensive line, that's the hope. I'm not banking on Trey Hill figuring it out. Jackson Carman might figure it out, sure. But Akeem Adeniji played in 15 games last year. And I get it. There's a lot of, moving around, and it was under Jim Turner, and he hasn't gotten a lot of Frank Pollock reps in practice. It's only been really 2 weeks. But maybe, just maybe, he does show those sweet feet that Dave Lapham raved about last year that, this coaching staff was excited about. Maybe they do bring him in, and the next time Jackson Carman gets dinged up, or maybe even before that, he gets some run at one of these spots. And it's just good to have another guy that at least the coaches are excited about. And I don't think he's going to go in there because, again, he did appear in 15 games. He's not going to go in there and penalty it up, right? Or just be shaking. Oh my gosh, this is my first NFL start. I don't think that's going to happen with Hakeem Adeniji. And that's the part that's exciting. So between him, hopefully Deontay Smith comes back at some point. You have some guys that might have a little bit of upside that might give you something if this depth gets tested, because a couple weeks ago, they didn't have anyone. And it felt like they didn't have anyone 5 days ago when they were playing the Jets, because you bring in Trey Hill and it kind of dismantles that final opportunity they had on offense.
And it wasn't just Trey Hill, but it didn't help. It definitely didn't help. And the bigger deal to me about Adeniji getting back isn't necessarily his impact this year. I mean, this is a guy that we talked about coming out of Kansas that we knew was going to be a developmental kind of player where there isn't great talent development at Kansas for the offensive line. At least that's what the book said about Hakeem Adeniji. A lot of athletic traits that would need to be developed. And as you said, James, coach is very excited about this, about him. And we talked about this again a few weeks ago at some point when we mentioned the guys that coaches told us they were excited about in the
Mm-hmm.
preseason. A lot of those guys have hit and have been exciting this year. And Chidobe Awuzie is probably the best example of that. And Logan Wilson is another one. So mostly on the defensive side of the ball, but Adeniji is a guy that when we talked about him coming off of the IR, there is some potential for this year. And more importantly, it's a development for the future. He gets to practice with the team for the rest of the year. He gets to go through game days for the rest of the year in year two. So it's not a lost year. And that does matter because when guys lose entire years, that can really be a setback or a killer in development, and it takes a lot to overcome that. But excited to see him back. I'm a little bit sorry to see Darius Hodge go, a guy that I thought could have been a developmental guy as a pass rusher, but they're
Practice
five
squad.
deep at defensive end on the 53 right now, and yeah, there's a really good chance Hodge makes it to the practice squad. Let's talk about things that matter this week, James. The keys to beating the Cleveland Browns in the first meaningful battle for Ohio. And I don't know how long coming up next.
Today's episode brought to you by McDonald's, and Chad Ocho Cinco Johnson is the ruler of the jungle on Sunday, and you better believe he's going to stop at McDonald's either before the game or after the game. Look, I stop there on road trips all the time. It is such a quick and easy way to get awesome food, whether it's the chicken McNuggets or the French fries or a McFlurry, which it's a little cold out, but who says no to ice cream? But win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team and away team can come to recharge. So whether it's after a Friday night football game, Saturday hoops, which are right around the corner, or something as simple as a Little League game, go there, get great Wi-Fi, great food, and recharge with McDonald's. As always, I'm loving it.
James, you and I agree. The number one key to this game is, well, I thought you were going to finish that sentence. I thought you were going to do that.
No, I will. It's one of two things. If you're talking about offense, you can't let Myles Garrett wreck it. If it's defense, it's slowing down the rushing attack and trying to stop the run. Which one are you talking about?
Well, I think defense might actually be a little more complicated than that because it's not just the run. It's like everything off the run. So let's start with Myles Garrett because Myles Garrett
so it is
pretty
Myles
simple.
Garrett. So we do agree.
Yeah, okay. I think it's Myles Garrett, right? And it's not actually so simple there either. Really, it never is because the Cleveland Browns do have some guys on the perimeter who can cover, who've been good in coverage this year. There's some questions at safety and how those guys have played. They're missing JOK in the second level, but they're getting good play out of their backup linebackers like Taki and Anthony Walker and all these guys. So on the defensive line, though, Myles Garrett is probably the best pass rusher in the NFL right now. And if he's not, he's certainly in the conversation, but I would say he probably is. And the reason I say probably is because I'm sure there will be people in the comments who want to argue with me about this and argue with you about this.
Trey Hendrickson, put some respect on his name, Jake.
You know what? He's, I think,
Trey's
leading
really
the NFL
good,
in like pressure rate, according to ESPN. But
over the past year and a half. Yeah. NFL Next Gen Stats.
There you go. So that said, Myles Garrett is better and is better in every phase of the game. And as you said yesterday, James, Myles Garrett is going to find a weakness, and the Browns aren't going to do like a TJ Watt treatment where he's going to line up at the same position the entire game. They will move him around, and that means the Bengals need to be ready for him at multiple spots and have a plan for him and Jadeveon Clowney to a lesser extent, and the rest of these guys on the Cleveland defensive line, wherever they line up.
First play of the game, I'd line them up across from Jackson Carman, and I'd say, all right, 79, what you got? Second play of the game, I line them up opposite Jackson Carman. All right, 79, what you got? And then when it's third and long, because Myles Garrett has blown up a run at some point in there, I'll line him up on the edge and see if he can get pressure on Burrow. Like, he's that type of weapon. And so, yeah, they're going to have to find a way to neutralize him some, because I think back to the sack fumble against Fred Johnson in week 2, he had another one, I believe, in week 7 last year, a sack fumble. You cannot have those in this game. If history tells us anything from last year, throw the records out because the Bengals were worse than the Browns, throw momentum out, and realize that these quarterbacks might get into a little bit of a duel, and that might happen. And I could see that happening. And when that happens, especially historically, I mean, 58-48 against, in 04, the Bengals beat the Browns. Then in 07, it was 51-45, Browns beat the Bengals. Then last year, both games in the 30s. I mean, there's some of the Battle of Ohio shootouts have been fun. And so I think Sunday could be that. And if that's the case, guess what you can't do? Be the offense that has that one turnover that just completely changes the outcome of the game or changes the momentum. And that's what Myles Garrett does. It's one thing to give up. Like, if he has 2 sacks on Sunday, let's do this. Let's do the BetOnline.ag, spread here. If you could just take no strip sacks, no interceptions, nothing like that from Myles Garrett, where he tips one up in the air and someone intercepts it, would you take 2 sacks right now if it's nothing else? Or would you roll the dice and say, okay, let's see how they do against him?
what about the rest of the team? I mean, it's hard, right? Because if Myles Garrett has 2 sacks and that's part of an ensemble performance, it's 8 sacks, then I
Well,
don't
that's
really
brutal.
like that. But if it's Myles Garrett is going to be the preponderance of the Cleveland Browns pass rushing and he gets 2 sacks, then you might take that, right? But
Mhm.
it's
The-
that's like such a oversimplification, a microcosm of what Myles Garrett does to a game plan.
For sure. But the fact that there aren't many players where you'd be like, yeah, I'll take the 2 sacks. But the fact that there's even a dilemma there where it's like, yeah, well, maybe, yeah, it's ridiculous. It says how good he is. That's all.
I'm trying to find like the player props for week 9, and I can't find them now on short notice. So I'm curious, like it might be 1.5 sacks. How many sacks
Yeah.
does Myles Garrett have this year, right? So
He has
uh,
10 and a half.
the interesting thing is that in some games for the Browns this year, he's been exclusively on the right side. Week 1, all of his snaps came on the right side, which would put him against the left side of the offense, would put him against Jonah Williams. Week 8, last week against the Steelers, right end the entire game. You go back to week 7, he has 5 snaps on the left side of the defense. Week 6, another what is this? He had a nose tackle snap. He had 9 snaps on the left side of the defense. The week before that, 18 snaps on the left side of the defense. So the point here is the Browns aren't shy about moving him around, but it'll be interesting to see how they choose to attack. And
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll see it as, we're going to let him. He's bigger than Jonah Williams. He's longer than Jonah Williams. He's more athletic than Jonah Williams. And we know Jonah's got the technique and can do a good job, but we're just going to let him go out athlete Jonah Williams. Or if, as you said, James, they identify the issues that the Bengals have had on the interior and give him more interior snaps. And that's a place where on the left side, they haven't put him on the left side inside the tackle very much this year. I think it's a total of, 12, 13 snaps plus the nose tackle snap. So 14 or so snaps out of his 419 have come in that part of the field. But if this is something that the Browns have identified that, we're going to put our best player against a weakness, especially if the Bengals go empty, that would be very interesting to see from a tactical perspective. And it's something that I assume the Bengals have had to prepare for.
Yeah. To me, if I'm the Browns, let's switch it. It's Locked On Bengals, not the Browns. Who cares about the Browns? If I'm the Bengals, I want them to say, hey, Myles, go out athlete Jonah Williams. If there's a scenario where you think you can come out on top, I think that's probably it. Where, yeah, it might not be perfect, but do you trust Jonah to be fundamentally sound and trust his, all the studying he's doing this week and everything? Like I do. Like I think that's the best route, but I don't think if I'm the Browns, I would do that. Why would you go up against the Bengals' best offensive lineman? I think. Certainly when you can line him up against Jackson Carman, you can move him around. You can try to do that, especially in empty. Like Jackson Carman versus Garrett, if they're empty, I mean, good luck, right? I would say good luck. That's a matchup. If I'm the Browns, if I see empty, I'm like, A95, go find 79. It would almost be like a Revis Island type of thing. I'd be like, all right, it's Carman Island. This guy's going to have to block me on an island.
The other thing there, and the Browns could take advantage of this, is it's much easier to give help if Myles Garrett lines up inside. But again, you can take advantage of that. If you know that you're going to get help because you've moved Myles Garrett around, you get a one-on-one somewhere else, right? And that is the upside of Riley Reef and Jonah Williams being your tackles. If those guys are on an island, I know Riley Reef has given up, a handful of pressures lately, but they've just stood out. It's not like it's a constant issue like it is with Bobby Hart constantly giving up the edge out there. So I think that'll be really interesting. I think Burrow figuring out how to attack this Cleveland defense will be interesting. I think it'll be what we see is the start of a trend where teams start to play too high, start to roll coverage over to Ja'Marr Chase's side of the field. Will that continue from New York to Cincinnati when they host the Browns this week? And if that does continue, can Tyler Boyd T. Higgins continue to exploit that extra attention for Ja'Marr Chase? Because Cleveland does have better corners than does New York. And even if that's rookie Greg Newsome, even if it's Greedy Williams, those guys are probably a little bit better than what New York had to offer. So I do think this is a tougher defensive test in every way than the Jets were.
Sure, no doubt.
And so for the offense, Myles Garrett and the rest of this defense is going to be a challenge. And we'll see if Joe Burrow can do as he wants to do and put 40 up. Meanwhile, when the Browns have the ball, Baker Mayfield presents his own challenges and certainly did last year as well. We'll talk about that coming up next.
I love Thanksgiving, all of the good food and treats. And man, Thanksgiving's coming soon. But it's the perfect time for Built Bars, the month of November. And I have a Built Bar every single day because you can have something delicious like a blueberry muffin and feel good about it. It's all about that balance, right? Because weekend's coming, weekend's here. You're going to watch the Bengals on Sunday. You'll probably, if you're at home, you're going to have a few, or you go out, have some cold. You have the Built Bar throughout the week, and it helps balance things out and helps you continue your fitness journey. Or maybe you just want to have a little bit of a healthier lifestyle, healthier snack, and you're not sacrificing taste by any stretch. Every single Built Bar covered in 100% chocolate, high in protein, low in sugar, low in carbs, perfect for you, perfect for me, perfect for Jake Liscow, perfect for anybody playing in that game on Sunday that we're talking about. So check out Built.com right now and use promo code LOCK15. You're going to get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com.
One of my favorite things is getting those Twitter messages about people that are trying Built Bars for the first time, and it seems like we get a couple every week. Anyway, go check out BetOnline.ag, the number one spot for all of your basketball and football betting action this year. They've got a new interface. If you haven't seen it for a while, go check out the new website. They've got even more odds, props, and lines than ever before. We've got a promo code for you. You'll get 50% matched on your first deposit. You use promo code Locked On, and you're going to get a bunch of free money. And I think everybody loves free money. Again, that's a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit at betonline.ag using promo code Locked On. From basketball to football, NHL's going on now. If you like hockey, UFC's out there too. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available at betonline.ag. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. James, I got a fun fact for you.
Oh, I love fun facts.
That the Cleveland Browns have allowed the 6th most sacks in the NFL this year? 23 sacks allowed. Did you know that the Bengals' 21 sacks is 4th most in the NFL? We're talking about Myles Garrett and the problems he's going to pose for Joe Burrow. How about Baker Mayfield and this beleaguered offensive line in Cleveland, which is still a very good unit, but is hurt at every position? J.C. Tretter's been on a load management practice schedule. Jedrick Wills at left tackle's been hurt. Jack Conklin isn't playing this week. Their backup Hubbard, their backup tackle's out for the year. A litany of injury issues along this Cleveland offensive line, and I wonder if that is something to watch. But you mentioned run game. So I mentioned off the run game, the boots and the nakeds and the play action stuff, because that's where the Jets kind of went early. That's where we've seen Jacksonville attack. And so it's that package, right? It's, Nick Chubb, and then everything they do off of the threat of Nick Chubb with an offensive line that's really good at blocking wide zone. And yes, D'Ernest Johnson.
Yeah, put some respect on D'Ernest's name.
He
saved a lot of people's fantasy lives a couple weeks ago.
Okay, but like you're stumping for the Browns a little bit too hard here, James.
No, I'm not. I just, he put up some big numbers in fantasy. You got to put some respect on his name. And look, if you don't, then you're going to get Ty Johnson. I mean, like that's kind of how I look at it. Like Kareem Hunt's out, and it should be like, oh, you only have to deal with Nick Chubb. But no, D'Ernest Johnson can play. And so that's a tough thing. But yeah, you're right, because Baker Mayfield isn't elite, and a lot of Bengals fans have mentioned that this week. But he's elite at that when he's healthy. Like you get him on the run a little bit, bootlegs, you do the play action stuff, you do that, and he completes, 22 straight last year with no Odell Beckham Jr. at Paul Brown Stadium to beat the Bengals. Like He went Mike White on you. And so you got to make sure, I can't believe that's a term that we can use, by the way, but you have to make sure that that does not happen. And to me, it starts with something really, really simple that they were awful at last week. When you're there and in position, make the damn tackle. And it's really hard to do with Nick Chubb, but you have to do it. You can't have 15 missed tackles, according to Pro Football Focus. If we're talking about that on Monday, then we're talking about an L in the Battle of Ohio for the Bengals.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see as well, like if the tackling needs to bounce back, and you can go look at the trend. Paul Daner tweeted this. I tweeted about the blitz rates against, and there's a very stark contrast in how often teams are blitzing the Bengals when they win and lose. There's also a very stark contrast in their missed tackle percentage from PFF when they win or lose. When they lose, they've missed 17% of their tackles in like each game, 17 point something or 18 point something percent. In the games they've won, they've been around 10%, which I think is probably a much more acceptable number. So tackling, absolutely agree with that. You know, discipline and run fits, not getting too deep in zones, as Logan Wilson talked about and Lou Anarumo talked about this week. These are things that are going to matter. And, you know, doing your job and not getting, you know, over aggressive the way that the defensive line did at times early against the screen game of the Jets. These are things that could matter against the Browns, but I'm going to be interested to see how the Browns choose to attack the Bengals as well. They're banged up on offense, as I mentioned, and Odell Beckham Jr. probably not going to play. So, you know, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Jarvis Landry, who's going to be battling through an injury maybe, you know, David Njoku, some tight ends, Austin Hooper. But is it going to be the week 2 approach from Baker Mayfield where he held the ball forever? Or is it going to be the week 7 approach from Baker Mayfield last year when he averaged 2.22 seconds to throw and got rid of the ball lightning quick, just like Mike White did last week against the Bengals, and goes out there and throws, you know, 3 big time throws and is very accurate downfield, and they're engineering open guys off of play action. It's going to be interesting to see what approach we get from Cleveland, because unlike last year, when we had these shootouts in the Battle of Ohio, these 2 very high-scoring games, both defenses this year are better. And the Bengals specifically have spent all of these resources to try to get a defense that can contain the running games in the AFC North. And so how does Cleveland adapt? And how do the Bengals adapt? We talked about the offense in the last segment, but how does Cleveland also adapt or attack this Bengals defense that last week was content to sit back and not rotate and not try to confuse after the first half? Because in the second quarter, they were blitzing and sending zone pressures and doing things to try to confuse Mike White, as Bengals fans pointed out on allbengals.com, I believe, in his film breakdown article. Shout out James, allbengals.com. They're going to have to be a little bit more dynamic this week, I think, and go back to, okay, what did we do to beat Lamar Jackson, and how can we apply those principles? Not necessarily those same schemes, those same techniques, but those same ideas of trying to confuse Baker Mayfield and attacking the things that he's weak at, and not just sit back in coverage and say, you know what, he can't beat us. We're gonna line up and beat him. Like, let's use scheme to our advantage as well. And I would like to see Lou Anarumo and this defensive staff and these defensive players figure that out this week and be more exciting on that side of the ball.
They're coming for Logan Wilson, Hakeem Davis-Gaither, and Jermaine Pratt. I know I would be. I would say, we're going to test these linebackers. We're going to go at it. And you're right. Look, the fact that they didn't try to confuse Mike White more, I mean, why? Why would you not do that? You know, Baker Mayfield's much more experienced than White, but you certainly should do that. Heck, before the Ravens game, what was I saying? I was like, well, everyone's talking about how the Ravens defense can confuse quarterbacks. How about you try to confuse Lamar? And it's the same thing here. You know, it's in the NFL, everybody's really, really good. So to say go out there and beat them, like, for example, Myles Garrett, just go out athlete Jonah Williams. I would never tell him to do that. I would move him around and give him the best matchup every single snap. And hopefully he eats if you're the Browns, right? That's how you look at it. But from the Bengals perspective, yeah, these linebackers, we'll see how that, you know, if they can answer the call, answer the bell. No Odell Beckham Jr., Donovan Peoples-Jones, to me, is their field stretcher. You know, we know what Jarvis Landry can do. Mike Hilton's gone up against him plenty. So that'll be an interesting back and forth there. And getting Baker Mayfield, making him uncomfortable early, where he's getting hit, taking hits on that shoulder, right? And not allowing the easy pass. Because that's what happened. Mike White got into a groove, and Baker's the same way, man. He's such a rhythm, not that most quarterbacks aren't, but he's such a rhythm passer where if you get him into those play actions, Nick Chubb's running for 5.5 yards, he's going to hit Njoku. He's going to make the right decisions, and he's going to be pretty accurate. That's what we've seen. Now, will he be as accurate with this shoulder? He hasn't been this year, but I'm not banking on him being inaccurate on Sunday. So that's a huge part about it. So we've seen Baker. He's 5-1 against the Bengals, 17 touchdowns or 18 touchdowns, one of the two. And I've said it all week because he's been good against Cincinnati every time he's played them. And this is a chance for this defense, to me, to show, for me at least, to prove that last week was an outlier and that wasn't them. Because that's kind of the defense, maybe not that bad, but that I expected to see coming into the year. Didn't have high expectations for this defense, and they exceeded them through 7 weeks. And then they laid an egg. So what are they going to do with that egg? Are they going to nurse it, or are they going to throw it against the wall and say that that's BS and that's not who they are? That's what I'm waiting to see on Sunday. So should I give my prediction, or do you have more to say?
I've got a couple more things I want to hit really quickly. One, Larry Ogunjobi revenge game. Get that pressure in the interior of the defensive line, and this matters. And I bring this up because Baker Mayfield this year has been a catastrophe when he's pressured. He's been pressured on about 29% of his dropbacks, according to Pro Football Focus, completing just 43% of his passes under pressure. He's just not making good decisions. He's throwing a lot of turnover-worthy passes under pressure. Mm-hmm. But we talked about, the blitz idea. The answer is not just blitz Baker Mayfield relentlessly, because he's been excellent against the blitz. He's been blitzed just 20% of the time this year, but on those plays has an 82 overall offensive grade from PFF, is completing 68% of his passes for 10.6 yards per attempt. When you don't blitz him and you make him beat coverage, just 7.8 yards per attempt. So a very stark split there, +3 in yards per attempt from very, very average to would be leading the league if you look at yards per attempt in a vacuum when blitz versus when not blitz. So it's going to be defensive linemen and zone pressures where you're bringing those simulated pressures. Find a way to get pressure without bringing extra guys. And that, despite that thing I mentioned at the top of this segment, the Bengals sack numbers, the Browns sack numbers, is not something that the Bengals have been great at this year. So with all of that said, James, let's get your prediction. Do the Bengals take care of business and bounce back from a loss as they have this year and bounce back at home after their 3-game road stretch, or are we going to have a long bye week?
What did Joe Burrow do this year against the Steelers? Oh, he helped the Bengals win. All right, that was his second time playing them. What did he do against the Ravens, his second time playing the Ravens? Oh, he helped them win. He balled out his second time against the Browns, but the team around him sort of failed last year. I think he comes out and just really tries to shred this team. I think he's going to have a big game, a really big game. And maybe I'm jinxing him and people are going to crush me. I think Burrow's going to have a big game. I don't think, and I get it, you're right, this secondary, they're better than what the Bengals faced last week, but the Bengals beat the Bengals last week, and I think they're going to be pretty damn dialed in. And I expect this offense to just hit the ground running and find ways to push the ball down the field, make big plays, generate big plays. You're not going to have the Ja'Marr Chase drop. Tyler Boyd's going to be on the same page in the red zone. I think that part's going to happen. And then defensively, that's where I start to question it a bit, and we'll figure out what this defense is made of. Ultimately, though, do I see Joe Burrow dropping to 0-3 against Baker Mayfield and the Browns? No, I don't. And maybe I'm crazy. Maybe they do end up 5-4. I just think that Burrow is going to be possessed this week. I think this offense is going to carry them to a victory, and the defense is going to play better for the 4th straight week, Jake. 4 straight week. They're going to hit my 30-point threshold that I set before the season. Bengals 31, Browns 27. Close, but no cigar for Baker Mayfield, Kevin Stefanski, and company. The Bengals sneak out of Paul Brown Stadium with a win in the Battle of Ohio, improve to 3-0 in the AFC North, and improve to 6-3 before the bye week. What do you think about that?
I would love it. I think that'd be great. And we'll see what happens. I think there are so many intriguing things to talk about here. We didn't hit them all. Another one that we didn't get to, James, just before we wrap up, is the Browns don't blitz. They've blitzed very, very little overall this year. And we know how good Joe Burrow is against the blitz. So, how Joe Burrow beats this Browns defense in your 31-27 scenario is something that'll be very interesting to me to see, because I think the Browns are going to sit back and make him have to be patient and take what they're giving him. And if he doesn't, then Myles Garrett's going to be there because you're not going to hold him off for that long. So a lot of really interesting things here, but I think the bottom line you kind of point out there is Baker Mayfield going to go to 3-0 against Joe Burrow's team? Boy, I don't like that idea. Let's not do that.
That's part, like you say it out loud, you're like, that's not going to happen. I think Tyler Boyd's going to have another huge game. And I think Chase, he shows up in big moments. I think he's going to go for 100 plus. There you go.
And that's
another bold prediction.
The biggest reason that the Bengals have been putting up 30 points a week the last few weeks is what Ja'Marr Chase does to defenses. Next time you hear from us will be after the Cincinnati Bengals host the Cleveland Browns in week 9. We'll be going into a bye week, and boy, do I hope it's at 6-3 for the Bengals. Until next time, Bengals fans, hoo-day, and have a good one.